Okay, conditions commonly associated with fibromyalgia. We're on to endocrinology. And overall, I give the National Fibromyalgia Association's pretty poor grades in regard to this. They list endocrine disorders. Now, how broad of a statement is that? Thyroid dysfunction, okay. And hyperthyroidism is the only one they name specifically, and that's high thyroid hormone. And that could cause fatigue, muscle weakness, difficulty sleeping. If you want to, you can pause the video, to read more symptoms in regard to that. What they did not list is hypothyroidism, and that can cause tiredness, weight gain. It can alter your blood cholesterol levels. Uh, and what's not listed here is like joint and muscle pain, that type stuff. There is a lot of fatigue with it. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is a form of hypothyroidism, and it's an autoimmune illness. And they do get into more symptoms, including joint and muscle pain, abnormal menstrual periods, depression, etc. It's a kind of thing, to the best of my understanding, that can really creep up on a person, like develop very slowly. There are blood tests to test your auto or your what do you call it, antibodies, to see if you do have an autoimmune thing going on with your thyroid. And if you're having symptoms like that, it might be a really good idea to have that um, antibody tested. Parathyroid problems also exhibit a lot of fibromyalgia symptoms, and the National Fibromyalgia Association completely omitted these. I'll say this with hyperparathyroidism, red flags in your labs would be high calcium and low phosphorus. So it's a little bit easier to get on track because, you're getting measured for your calcium, with your routine labs. And for hypoparathyroidism, you'll show low calcium and low vitamin D labs. I'm not sure if phosphorus is checked routinely, but if you have a calcium alteration that's out of normal range, you might want to pursue a parathyroid issue. Anyway, on to the symptoms. You'll see where these do have symptoms of fibromyalgia. For hyper, tire easily or weakness, depression, forgetfulness, bone and joint pain. Frequent complaints of illness. Okay, and for hypo, low parathyroid, muscle aches or cramps in your legs, feet, abdomen, or face, twitching or muscle spasms, fatigue and weakness, painful menstruation, depression and anxiety. So I think you will see my point of adding that to the list. Next. Another complete omission by the National Fibromyalgia Association are any adrenal issues. Um, I get into more detail with Cushing's disease or Cushing's syndrome in other videos, but it can really, really look like fibromyalgia symptoms. The fatigue, the muscle wasting, brain fog. It just covers the whole gambit. Adrenal insufficiency, I get into more detail in other videos, but again, the fatigue that could cause weight gain, sleep disturbances, all of the above. I added Conn's disease or Conn syndrome and pheochromocytoma to the list. If you do have a adrenal workup, like say they have identified an adrenal adenoma, and I did by circumstances through an appendectomy, it revealed an adenoma, and they had to rule out Conn's disease and a pheochromocytoma in as a part of the process, and that it's part of the workup. But Conn's can cause muscular aches and weakness, muscle spasms, low back and flank pain, tingling sensation, and this is due to an excess of your adrenals making excess amount of aldosterone, and that results in lower renin. And these are, specific to adrenal workup. A pheochromocytoma is an overproduction of norepinephrine and epinephrine. And these are the fight or flight hormones. It can cause nausea, weakness, abdominal pain, tremors, difficulty breathing. I'm just adding that to the list, to give a broader look at the adrenal function or malfunction. It's a little bit of a story time, but during my adrenal workup, one of my 24-hour urines it's called catecholamines, norepinephrine, epinephrine are included in that, and it measured quite high, very high. So I actually had to have a follow-up test where I did a resting catecholamines, and that's when you go in, they start an IV, tuck you in bed, and then test those fight or flight hormones while you're resting, and they did come back normal. But the point of this little story time is that adrenal Cushing's, it was caught in the act actually of it affecting these fight or flight hormones, and they absolutely have to rule it out because they need to, if you do have a pheochromocytoma, they need to pre-medicate you before surgery, so your life is not at risk. Especially in light of the studies I came across, and you'll find videos on, the National Fibromyalgia Association completely gets flunking grades in regard to pituitary issues and an association with fibromyalgia, especially hypopituitarism. But I'll start with Cushing's disease, Cushing's syndrome. Cushing's disease involves your pituitary gland. Cushing's syndrome involves your adrenal gland, and either or are making an excess, causing your body to make an excess amount of cortisol. I do, get into symptoms in other videos, as I've said, so I'm not going to go into great detail, but the symptoms are there. Adrenal insufficiency, the same thing. I get into more details on the symptoms of that, the fatigue, muscle pain, etc., etc. Not going to go overboard on that at the moment. Hypothyroidism can be either caused by your thyroid or your pituitary messaging your thyroid. Adult growth hormone deficiency, I get into those details in other videos where, this one is huge in the fibromyalgia studies. Decreased muscle mass, high cholesterol, poor bone density, poor sleep. The list goes on, and the studies are demonstrating that in a certain percent fibromyalgia, quote, patients, are adult growth hormone deficient. And I also added hypopituitarism and hypopituitarism. Pan means your pituitary is not functioning with a number of hormones. I would be growth hormone, ACTH would affect your adrenal glands, your thyroid, your sex organs, antidiuretic hormone, oxytocin and prolactin. Um, and I've mentioned it in other videos, but I'm going to mention it again here as Sheehan syndrome. Is an illness that can occur at the time of giving birth to a child. Your pituitary is on high gear, and the blood flow to it in certain cases can be damaged and damage your pituitary gland. And I underlined the inability to produce milk for breastfeeding in women. And this would be more quickly identified at the time of the birth of the baby, that if a mom can't produce milk, so they should get on that right away. But here's the catch with Sheehan's. In certain cases, it can have a slow onset. So I do want to reiterate that, if your symptoms even came on slowly after giving birth to a child, it could be a red flag. Um, and I mentioned the growth hormone, and this is mentioned in other videos, but it's worth repeating. If you think there might be an issue, the growth hormone signals your body to make a substance called IGF-1. And that has a more steady level in your bloodstream. So it would be like an entry-level test to see how your growth hormone might be producing. Growth hormone itself is pulsated. It's made, at its peak in your deepest sleep. So it would really require a stimulation test by a good endocrinologist. But if, again, as an entry level type test, IGF-1. And thank you so much for listening.